Once again, Johnell Bell, co-facilitator for the Community Advisory Group. Thank you for joining us for today's June 8th, 2023 meeting on a hazy, almost summer afternoon. Would love to welcome my other co-facilitator, Lisa, to say some remarks as well.
We're really glad to have everyone joining us today. Lisa, Keohokalole, Schauer, and happy to be part of the CAG.
Great. Well, if we could go ahead and get the slides up, we'll do our housekeeping items here. Okay, if we can get that in the presentation view, that would be awesome. Thank you. Okay, so just a reminder, we do have closed captions in English and in Spanish. English closed captions are available within Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow this link to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window, https://ibr.news/captions. Next slide, please. Just a reminder of how you may access closed captions. At the bottom middle of your screen, you should see a menu of options. If you can't see the menu, hover your mouse over the bottom middle of the screen, then click on the CC icon and a separate window with captions will appear. In an effort to continue to center equity, there is an ASL interpreter in addition to closed captioning. To make sure the interpreter is always visible, please right-click their video and select Spotlight Video. For those watching on YouTube, when we screen share, you will be able to see the slideshow, closed captioning, and the ASL interpreter. You will still be able to hear different people speaking, but may not see them. And just a reminder for our webinar tips, again, thank you for joining us. Please do join either by phone or computer, but not both. We encourage panelists to turn on your video. Again, we're still in this virtual space, so to the degree that you're able, please do keep video on. Please keep your audio on mute when not speaking. If you experience technical difficulties, please contact program staff at 360-329-6744. Just a reminder for public input instructions, there will be an opportunity to provide brief public input later in the meeting today, roughly around 5:45. Verbal public comment will be welcome in the Zoom webinar during the designated time with the option to turn on your web camera. Please use the link located in the meeting description on YouTube meeting page or on the IBR CAG meeting webpage. Commenters will not be allowed to share their screens and will be removed from the room once the public comment period concludes. To comment by phone, you may dial 1-669-900-6833 or 408-638-0968. You'll want to remember to enter the meeting ID number 993-5459-6043 and the passcode 674942. Please remember to dial *9 to raise your hand. After you are invited to speak, you'll want to also dial *6 to unmute yourself. Of course, you can always submit public comment after the meeting. You'll want to fill out a comment form on the program website or email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with CAG Public Comment in the subject line. You can also call 360-859-0494 for our Washingtonians or 503-897-9218 for Oregonians. Or you may also dial our 800 number, 1-888-503-6735. Please do state CAG Public Comment in your message. Written comments need to explicitly say CAG Public Comment in the subject line or in the body of the message for them to be identified and distributed to CAG members. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to advisory group members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance of their next meeting. And maybe Lisa, I'll ask for you to lean in on this slide.
Sure. This is a slide that we show every time, and we have a few folks that are new to the CAG, we've been meeting now for over 2 years, but our commitment to how we show up in our space remains the same. And although we were able to meet just a couple times or maybe just once in person, relationships are important. And so we want to ensure that we remain focused on our goal, that we are noticing our power dynamics in the room, virtual or in person, and that we're creating space for multiple truths and norms. We're practicing being kind and brave and examining racially biased systems and processes and looking for a learning whenever possible. Turn it back over to you, Johnell.
Great, and just an overview of today's meeting. We'll hear in a moment. Here, opening remarks. We're joined by our co-chair Ed Washington. Our other co-chair Lynn Valenter is on vacation, so will not be joining us today. We'll have an opportunity of hearing from each other with the prompt, what was your first job? So be thinking about that. We'll then receive an update from Assistant Program Administrator Ray, maybe. And then we'll have an opportunity to unpack some design concepts with our bridge visualization. We'll then continue a discussion on urban design elements, as well as receive public comment, final thoughts, and then we'll have meeting adjournment. Next slide. So with that, Mr. Washington, I turn it over to you. Ed?
I'm unmuted now. Sorry
Okay.
about that. Just like to welcome everybody here today on a pretty nice day. It was a little bit chilly, I think, this morning, but it's getting better. And I know in listening to one of your fellow members, Martha, who is in New York, and she's experiencing all of that bad smoky weather that's coming out of Canada, inundating New York. So glad to have you on, Martha. Glad to have everybody on, and I look forward to you all having a good meeting and lots of good input today. What we're going to do is just introductions and a check-in question. And the check-in question today is, what was your first job? And I'd like to ask everybody to raise their virtual hands so that we can make sure that everybody has the opportunity to do that. And whoever is ready to go, just raise your hands and we'll go from there. Well, I'm going to go right from the top of the board. Sam, why don't you start it?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So glad to see you all. So my name is Sam Kim. My pronouns are they, he. I am a super commuter living in Brush Prairie, Washington, and working in Hillsboro, Oregon. My first job was, we came to America when I was 10 years old, and I picked a ton, 2,000 pounds of blueberries at a farm next door. That was really good money for a 10-year-old kid back then. So, hey, I said, wow, in America, all you have to do is work hard. That's it. You don't even have to be too smart. That's great. A little kid can make money. So do I pick the next person?
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead, please?
Tom, you're next to me.
I guess I'm next in line. My name is Tom Hickey. I'm on the CAG representing the North Portland neighborhood associations and the neighborhoods in North Portland. My first job outside of yard work for the neighbor was as a busboy in a restaurant in Alexandria, Virginia, where I grew up. And it's Martha's turn.
Yeah, I'm Martha Wiley, and I'm in Vancouver, and I am a paratransit rider, although right now I'm on vacation in New York, but most of the time in Vancouver, I'm a paratransit rider. My first job was taking inventory for a department store that is no longer with us, which was it was a store called Allmart, and it was a horrible job, and I was terrible at it. So I'm really glad that phase of my life is over, and now I'm going to call on Ray Maybe, who will talk about his job.
Yeah, thanks, Martha. I'm Ray Mabey, Assistant Program Administrator with the IBR team. Happy to be here this evening or afternoon. Yeah, my first job was working for an art store, cutting mats and frames and assembling that with a print or whatever the customer bought. So just putting that package together so they could take it home and hang it up. It was a lot of fun. Let's see, I will pick, how about Marcus?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Marcus Mundy. I'm with the Coalition of Communities of Color. I am a member of the CAG, he, him, his pronouns. And my first job was at, when I was in high school, I just turned 16. It was at American Linen Supply. I would go there after school and they had a factory, you know, American Linen Supply did the towels and sheets for hotels and whatever. I was a janitor. And we had 2 janitor jokes, you know, we had to say, what are you doing today? I said, you know, really cleaning up, making big dust. You know, those were our janitor jokes that we did to pass the time. But that's what I did, you know, just every day after school, 5 days a week. So I will pass it to Jeffrey Temple.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Jeffrey Temple. I am with Fred Meyer, QFC Kroger. Preferred pronouns he, him, his. And my first job was a paper route, which I don't think exists anymore. Be surprised if there was a paper route available anywhere in America these days, but that's what I did and learned a lot and developed a little bit of a work ethic as a youngster, and it's a good experience. So I will pass it on to, I think Dina Horton looks next on my screen.
Thanks so much. I'm Dina Horton, Government Relations Director for Pacific Northwest Waterways Association, representing the river users and multimodal freight users. She, her pronouns, and my first job, gosh, I'm really dating myself. I worked at a video store back in the days when you could rent not only the VHS and beta tapes, but also the VCRs that played those tapes. So yeah, it was actually the only job I could find that wasn't fast food at the time. So I was happy to take it and ended up meeting literally my lifelong best friend there. We were the only 2 people not related to the owner. So we always got shafted with Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning, you know, shifts because none of the owner's family wanted to work on Fridays, Saturdays, or Sundays. But it did create a lifelong friendship. So out of the horrible first time job, I got a best friend. And I will call on Jana Jarvis.
Or should we just discuss?
One moment. Going to try to turn I'm watching a hearing. I'm in the middle of legislative session here, so I apologize to you. I'm Jana Jarvis, President and CEO of the Oregon Trucking Association. And my first job was working in a fabric store. I was a sales clerk, and my mother was an avid seamstress. And so she loved the fact that I got discounts there. So.
Who would you like to call on, Jim?
Oh, okay. I'll call on Sherry. Sherry, I saw that you were on there. Where'd you go? All right. Well, I'll call on Andrew then.
Thanks, Jana. Andrew Hone, he, him, President and CEO, Portland Business Alliance, and the world famous downtown Portland. And I just reflecting back, it was the first paid job. I had lots of, you know, lawn mowing jobs and things around the neighborhood, but the world famous pizza shuttle in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which was the only 23-hour a day pizza delivery business in the city. And it was cleaning in the back, which was and emptying grease traps, which I do not recommend. So I'll call on Bill. Up to you, Bill.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. I'm Bill Prouse with the Oregon Association of Minority Entrepreneurs. And I think my first job was, of course, a whole bunch of first jobs like quick paper route and helping people clean their houses and stuff. But my first real job was a wheat truck driver. I was born and raised in Portland, but I got a job at 16 driving a wheat truck in Dufur, Oregon, which is 13 miles south of the Dalles. And it was two of the, I'll say, hardest summer jobs I ever had, but they're most rewarding when I look back on them, the things they did, because we also did haying, doing the baling of hay and everything like that. So it was quite an experience for a city guy. Anyway, I will look to Irina.
I'm Irina. I represent East European immigrants, so Ukraine, Russia, Belarus. And you probably all heard there was a disaster, that the dam broke in Novakhovka. So it's going to be terrible, I don't know, years to the territory there, because this dam was also regulating all the rivers, kind of like water for irrigation and for agriculture. So there will be ecological, humanitarian, agricultural disaster. So if you can afford, there will be people collecting money for funds to save people whose housing were flooded. It's about 16,000 people lost housing. There were so many poor animals that were lost in, so it's just terrible. Okay, back to work. So my first job was at 14. I was equivalent to American lemonade stand lady. I was pouring Russian kombucha equivalent that's called kvass. It's a fermented drink made out of yeast and bread. It's yummy and sweet. That's what I was doing during summer. Okay, and I'm picking next. I didn't see the hand of Robin raised, but I'm picking him.
Thank you, Irina, and good afternoon, everyone. Robin Richardson, he, him, his. I live in Vancouver. I am a bicycle commuter to downtown Portland, as well as an auto commuter to downtown Portland. I'm an at-large member, and my first job was on a farm outside of, large farm outside of Eugene, driving combine and windrower for many, many years. So I will call on, I need my glasses. Sorry. Julie.
All right, off mute. You guys can hear me all right?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. So I'm Julie Doumbia. I am a resident of, I started this project North Portland, now Northeast Portland. So I'm just a community volunteer in this group. And my first job was at 16, I believe, and at a preschool after I would get done with high school. And let's see, okay, where are the hands? There we go, okay. I will choose Casey.
Good afternoon. My name is Casey Lyles. I'm the design manager for the IBR program, pronouns he, him. And my first job was similar to a couple others, Bill and Robin. I worked on a grass seed farm processing seed and all the way through baling hay and even burning fields. And I'll pick on, how about, is it whoever's in Oregon Walks? How's that?
I was just noticing that I had logged on as our organization one. So you can call me Oregon, or you can call me Zachary Lauritsen. I'm the interim director at Oregon Walks. Many of you probably know Ashton Simpson, who is our former executive director. And I'm after some transition, stepping in his role here. It's really great to be here. Kind of makes me feel a little bit like the new kid at school who's like walking into the lunchroom with their tray. Like everybody knows each other. So hopefully you'll say hi to me as the new guy. First job, I was a soccer referee of youth leagues as like an 11-year-old. And I remember the advice they told me, which is, I mean, I was like 11, the kids were like 6. And the advice they said was just blow the whistle with confidence.
And I remember thinking, that's great, great advice. And then as I got older, I realized, no, that's terrible advice, because then it's like setting you up this idea of even when you're wrong, just be confident. So it's like the whole thing has come full circle in life, thinking about what it means to be right or wrong or confident or whatever. So it's great to be here.
You want to pass it on to someone?
Yeah, I'll pass it on to Yolanda.
Wow, Oregon Walks, I kind of feel like you. I am new to this group, but I know Johnell, Mr. Johnell Bell. My name is Yolanda Frazier. I'm the president for our local NAACP Chapter 1139B, as in branch. I'm also the DI director for Airway Science for Kids, but most importantly, first and foremost, I am a child of God and a child of my two beautiful late parents, a mother of four, wife to one, and a very new grandmother. I did not hear the opening question, but I'm kind of getting a sense of what it is. My first job was held off of Alberta Street in North Portland. I worked for this Black entrepreneur. He went by the name of Mr. Booth. And he would pay kids $1 a day, and we would do all things clerical. But I quickly learned that it wasn't just clerical administrative work he was trying to instill in us. It was the ability to be able to speak with people, to have that public relations type of dialogue with people, and to be able to connect with people no matter what you're talking about, no matter what venue you're in. Welcome everyone. And I can't stay very long because I also inadvertently scheduled plans around the same time with a whole nother meeting, but thank you so much. And let me see, who might I call on? Mr. Osborne, Tom Osborne, yeah.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Tom Osborne. I'm a director at Night Architects over here in the UK. Great to be here. My first job was at a garden centre in Leicester, in the middle of England, which soccer fans may be familiar with. We had some success a couple of seasons ago. My job there was to push cars that got stuck in the muddy field, having parked there out of the mud, which wasn't much fun. But started my career in transport infrastructure quite early. So here we are. Yeah, I'll pass over to my colleague who's next to me, Laura Langridge.
Thanks, Tom. Really great to be here. First time at the CAG. My name is Laura Langridge, pronouns she, her. And my first job was at a small town toy store, and I used to be a kind of salesperson and close up at the end of the day. And I always thought I had the best keys in the town. Toy store after hours. And I'll pass on to, is it Jarina?
Hi, I'm Jarina Hatch. I work with Community in Motion out of Vancouver, Washington. We are a non-emergency medical transportation brokerage, and we run a couple of other programs. I'm also a mobility manager for Clark County, Washington. My first job, I worked at the Carnival Restaurant, which used to be in Portland, just down the hill from OHSU. It doesn't exist anymore, sadly. I was a cashier. How about Sherry?
Hi, good afternoon. Looks like I might be last. Sherry Call, president of the Washington Trucking Association. Our office is located in Olympia, Washington, and I have been in Washington since 1994, but I am from Utah originally. My first job was at a ski resort where I worked in the kitchen making tater tots, and I also cleaned the bathroom and was happy to get some of those menial jobs out of my system at age 14. Thank you.
Okay, is that everybody? We didn't miss anybody, did we?
I think we might have missed Tom from Clark College, who joined.
Okay.
Not to put you on the spot, Tom. Do you want to introduce yourself? Might not be in a place to do so.
Okay.
Hello?
Tom?
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm at work. So, my name is Tom Sandor, Capital Projects Manager for Clark College. First job for me was working with my dad in his law firm as a typist, I believe. It was a great experience because we used to sit every weekend, kind of have a father and son bonding, and also learn a lot of vocabularies. And he was not great at typing faster, and I was good at it, to kind of complement each other out. So that was the first job at the age of 12.
Great. I think that is it, Mr. Chair. So we can go ahead and
yes.
Now welcome Ray Mabey, our Assistant Program Administrator, to provide a programmatic update.
Thank you.
And just a reminder of, if we can go back to the prior slide, I'll just cover that real quickly. Just a reminder of sort of upcoming topics again today. We're going to have further discussion relative to design. And the focus of today's conversation is we really want CAG to highlight the process. And so we'll have more time talking about the importance of a process and how that leads to good design. July, we'll have more conversation relative to urban design, where we'll focus on Hayden Island as well as bridge design constraints. And then August, we will talk about Vancouver waterfront and bridge configuration. So with that, I will turn over to Ray Mabey.
Yeah, good afternoon. Once again, yeah, Ray here. Happy to be here to share with you some program updates. I did want to just note and thank Tom Osborne. He's 8 hours ahead of us, so it's tomorrow for him, I believe. So thanks him. I really thank him for being available for our meeting today. Program's been busy and will always be busy, I think. But we've been busy doing a lot of things and engaging with the community in really just continuous engagement, but with a purpose now of looking at getting feedback, but also letting them know about the upcoming draft supplemental environmental impact statement that will come out at the end of this year. We want to make sure that people are aware of it coming and that they will have opportunity to comment. And part of that effort has been a couple of neighborhood forums. There was one done in Vancouver at the end of last month. Pretty successful, pretty well attended. I think numbers I've heard, don't quote me, we're in the 70 to 90 range. We had layout tables with rollout maps, program information, staff there to answer questions. Really good dialogue. Now, one thing we're also doing is capturing the comments and taking notes about what we received, so we can kind of bring that back to this group and let folks know about what we heard from both of these sessions. We just had one here a couple nights ago in Portland at the WAMI, I think, Center, and again, pretty well attended, not as much as Vancouver, but lots of good engagement with community members. Great to see that just overall engagement, period. Those in-person opportunities for the team to engage with our community is invaluable. So we're going to see more of these coming up and more engagement in fairs as well as we go into summer. Couple updates on grants and permitting. And I think on the grant side, we know this is grant season for us. We've got three main grants we're pursuing this year. The mega project grant is I think a USDOT grant, and the bridge improvement program grant, which is federal highway. Both of those we're seeking about a total of I think $1.5 billion from a combination between those grants. We expect those the notice of funding opportunity or the notice of grant coming out later this month for the mega, and then I think in August for the bridge improvement program grant or investment program. These are really important for the program. These are the once in a generation grant opportunities that have a limited availability and a lot of competition. And so we actually anticipated the mega grant application to be open sooner. However, I think that timing is working out. As you know, we've received commitment from Washington for $1 billion for the program. Oregon is considering that match to Washington. And if you pay attention to the news, there is the legislature is figuring out how to progress together and look after the interests of the state. And as they do that, you know, we understand that from the governor's office and legislative leadership that this program is a transportation priority for them, and that as they work through the other budget issues that they'll be considering IBR. So our hope is that through closure of this session or any potential special session that IBR will receive Oregon's match to Washington's, which is good timing for these grant opportunities, showing that unified support from both states as the feds really like to be last dollar in. And the third grant that we're pursuing is the Federal Transit Administration Capital Improvement Grant. I think we're pursuing $1 billion on that. And that is funds that will help fund the light rail and transit portions of the program. So it is grant season for us. Grant providers will be busy pursuing these. On the permitting side, we are doing the work in the NEPA, or the National Environmental Policy Act, work that leads into that supplemental environmental impact statement that I mentioned. We're working towards getting the information, understanding the potential impacts of the program and how we might avoid, minimize, or mitigate those. And so we are working on with various agencies, whether it's the Army Corps, on river channels or levee coordination, but we're also working with the Coast Guard around a bridge permit. We need a bridge permit from the Coast Guard to actually construct this. So we are looking at various ways to meet the river navigation needs. And I'll be talking about that a little bit later as we get into the visualization options or that we have for you today. So work is ongoing on that front as well, and we'll continue through the environmental process and then really wrap up in earnest right after that. Like I said, we've been busy engaging and being out on the road. There's been quite a few different presentations around the program to various organizations. As you see here, some internal, I call them internal to the transportation agencies, to ODOT, and in a partnering conference between them and their consulting partners, to internal surveyors, and then to other groups such as the Columbia Economics Forecast Breakfast, Society of American Military Engineers, I think it was just yesterday, Professional Engineers of Oregon. So there's a lot of interest, and we're trying to make sure that we satisfy requests and get out and share information about the program. But I'll pause there and see if there's any questions before I move on to the next phase. Okay, nailed it, or everybody needs a cup of coffee.
Dina has her hand up. Dina?
Oh, great, Dina.
Hi, just curious if, given some of the changes that were recently passed regarding the NEPA process, if you anticipate that shortening your timeline at all? Or since this was started prior to the passage of that, will this stay on the same timeline that you've previously predicted?
Yeah, great question, Dina. With a program, and we expect our NEPA work to conclude at the end of next year. And so when you have a project or a process that takes, we started a while ago, 2 years to work through, you're exposed to potential policy and regulation changes along the way. And then we'll work with our federal partners or the other agencies that control those processes about how to incorporate and when to incorporate those changes. So those conversations are ongoing around how best to meet and address those. Can't talk specifically about them, but I know we'll reach agreement on how to address them within our timeline. Everybody knows that our schedule is paramount. You've heard Administrator Johnson talk that time literally is money on this program. And I think everybody else realizes that as well. But great question. Anything more? Okay. Well, maybe I can frame up the next stage of this for me is we've been looking at bridge configuration and as well as some bridge options. So I think we shared some, I'll call it sections of a bridge, of the bridge configurations we could look at. And if you recall from the previous effort of CRC, we had kind of a stack configuration where we had the highway vehicles on top, and then on the bottom deck we had either transit on the southbound or the pedestrians and utilities on the northbound bottom deck with the northbound traffic on top. Thanks. Oops, there we go. And so we looked at that, and we also were looking at what do we call a single level option, where you have both highway and transit and bikes and peds on the same level, but the southbound bridge would be the bikes, the transit and vehicles and southbound traffic, and northbound would be bikes and peds and northbound highway traffic. And so these allow for some different options of superstructure type, and we developed these to help share what is possible as we move forward. There's lots of work to go through and validate and confirm that these are indeed feasible and would work. But we wanted to make sure we got some thoughts out there on how we might work through this. So Brent's kind of scrolling through these, but I want to talk about these. So the viewpoint and vantage point we have here, can we just stay on, existing, and then quit moving it? Thanks. So this is the existing view from the west side of the bridge from the north bank of the river. So downtown Vancouver waterfront. Looking at the existing bridge, what we'll do is we'll look at all the options from the same vantage point. Online, we've got 4 different views on our webpage for each of these different configurations. So feel free to take a look at those later. So if we can move to the next one in line, please, Brent. Excellent. So this is a fixed span. We we were looking at a movable span. Most of these will be fixed. Using the fixed span or the single fixed span and the single level option allows us to lower the deck a bit to the lower deck of the stacked option, which allows us to have superstructure that goes above the deck and not impede the airspace needed from the FAA for either Portland International or Pearson Airfield. So it allows us to have a different superstructure that some may view as more aesthetic, but it adds more structural elements. So in this case, this is extra dose, so it's kind of like a cable stayed bridge, like the bridge, the rail bridge in downtown Portland, the transit bridge there. but it's combined with a pretty robust superstructure. So the towers aren't as high as you might see on a cable stayed structure. Let's go to the next one. And one thing to think about too is we've kept the pier locations in the same spot. This is critical to minimize in-water impacts and be able to handle the river navigation channels either during construction and the final configuration. In this case, we're looking at a fin-back bridge. The structure is somewhat similar, but the cables you saw in the previous element are encased in these superstructure elements you see coming down from the peak. Just adding a different type of feel and texture to this option. Let's look at the next one. Okay, so this is a haunched concrete beam. This would be very similar to what the I-205 bridge is, the Glenn Jackson, a post-tension concrete superstructure that has kind of a curved beam look to it with a deeper section at the piers. That's a fairly common superstructure type. Next one, please. Okay. And this is steel girder, similar, not as deeply haunched at the piers, but kind of a similar look. You'll see as we switch between these that the piers look a little different. Now, these are really just to show this kind of relative size. When we have a steel superstructure for the main portions of the bridge, it's lighter than concrete. So this is to imply that we'd have a little less robust foundation and column areas because of that issue, because the superstructure is lighter. But the design of the foundation and piers is still in front of us. This is just to show kind of a relative comparative size, but pretty similar to distance from the concrete we just saw, but lighter in design. Next option, please. Okay, so this is the stacked version where you'd see this is what was developed on CRC. This is much like the Markham Bridge in Portland that carries I-5 over the Willamette, where you've got a steel truss and you've got a lower deck that carries traffic and an upper deck that carries traffic. But in this case, on the southbound, that lower deck would have the light rail vehicles, and then the northbound would have pedestrians. The options that I mentioned, single level and then stacked, address different issues. We've heard that there's some concern about the pedestrians and bikes being outside the view of the traveling public on that lower deck. Also some concerns of transit and emergency response on the separate deck. So moving things at a single level somewhat resolves those issues in a way that allows it visibility and as well as access for emergency vehicles more readily. So each of these has pluses and minuses that we'll continue to evaluate. Next option, please. Okay, so we've been working with the Coast Guard and our federal partners on what we need to evaluate, and we heard pretty clearly that while we have the previous program developed a bridge that got a permit at 116 feet, the Coast Guard had heard from river users that they need and are looking for a bridge that provides the existing clearance or unlimited. And so to respond to their concerns, we've added an option for a movable span in our work. And so this would show that movable span option that would allow for the current bridge height. This is a lift span, much like we have today, but you'll see those towers are just kind of blocks. And actually there's been advancement in design and aesthetics around movable bridges. The current structures have towers that are open and you can see all the cabling and counterweights. And so new movable bridges are putting a sheathing or cover around that so it's contained and helps keep the mechanics and the different pieces out of the weather to minimize maintenance issues. So The towers that we would see, and there's a couple examples that we have from around the world that are much like this, where they just look like a tower and you don't see all the things going on inside them. And the next option, Brent, I think you'll see a viewpoint with that lift span up. There you go. And look, there's a vessel going underneath it now. So, you know, moving forward, really what can we expect and how can we engage in these? Configuration needs to come first. So as we look at the stack versus the single level, that's what we're working through now to understand the benefits and trade-offs around those options. And that'll take us through the EIS process. And then once we land on what that is, then we can start to move to the superstructure type and a process to arrive at what that chosen superstructure type might be. We just so happen to have Tom and Knight Architects here to kind of guide us through a high-level understanding of what a process might be to do that and the different factors we'll consider. But I'll pause there and see if there's questions. And Brent, you can probably take the visualization down. Thank you for flipping through those for me.
Any questions, comments? Okay. Let's see, Zachary, then we'll go to Martha, and then we'll go to Jenna.
Good.
Thank you. Ray, can you talk a little bit about, I mean, we're 2023, so I imagine we can get a sense and a feel for what these different bridge designs would look and feel like from different vantage points. I guess I feel a little handcuffed from just one spot, and then I'm looking online and I think there's 4 angles, but I'm visualizing like being a sim on the computer game, right? And like walking across the bridge and seeing what that feels like, or being on the beach and seeing what that feels like. When is that going to roll out? I'm assuming that something like that will happen. Can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah, good question, Zach. We actually have both these first kind of get a first feel. As you know, each of those types of 3D simulations, visualizations, and renderings, we will make sure that we're putting that towards the ones that we are narrowing down to. At this point, it might be premature to put in that level of effort, but we know that there's a request for other views, like what does it look like from under the right under the bridge on either bank, and some other viewpoints. So we know those. We know we've gotten some feedback on from our partners on what those might be, what they desire, and as we do get closer to what we think we might go to, or the options get narrowed down, that next step will be how they look and feel a little more robustly. So those types of things are addressed, and you got a sense for what they may look like. These models actually, in their vantage point views, are not complete because we don't have a lot of detail yet, especially how they touch down. That's work that's underway. So if you were to zoom out and take a different view of this model, you'd basically see them ending in thin air because we don't have that answer yet. So as we continue to develop the design and know more about what it looks like, we can get to that point of developing those types of rendering. Good question. Martha, was it Martha or Jeffrey next? Or
I think
oh, sorry. I'm just jumping right in since not. I have 2 separate sets of questions. One has to do with the lift alternative, and you have those big towers. How do those new towers affect the height limit that the FAA has? I mean, because to me, they look taller than the existing ones, but I mean, that just might be your view. So, so that would be one question, if those new lift towers would affect the FAA approval. And then with regard to that, you have shifted the lift from close to Vancouver over one set. So will that affect the Corps of Engineers and their dredging work there? Will ships be able to get through in this new location? And then I guess I actually have several questions. So And another one is, if we're trying to manage the Coast Guard and the FAA, surely a very thin bridge would be better than a thick one, right? Because then you could have the bottom be higher and the top be lower. So, and I guess that's a question too. So,
wow, fantastic questions, Martha. I'll take them in order. So the towers for the lift and the conflicts with FAA airspace. And it's tied to your second question. Yes, indeed, we're moving the primary channel a bit south to align with the peak of the bridge across the river. So that's work we have to do with the Army Corps to basically switch the barge channel and the primary channel from where they are today. And so that's part of our permitting process, but that allows for the peak, like I said, to align with the main channel there where that lift would be, or even on the fixed span where that main channel would be. Shifting that a bit to the south and having those towers does alleviate a lot of the conflicts that we would have if we kept it in place, because the current towers do impact airfield airspace, but they also predate the airspace. So they were there first. But moving them south gets us out of that main approach path, departure path, in a way that we've heard from the FAA that they think is doable and has some impact, but not one that I forget the term of the actual main path. It doesn't get in the main path that they have for that approach. So we think it's something we can get done and has minimal impact. So that's kind of your first two questions. Oh, dredging. The river naturally scours out to about 17 feet right now anyway, and that's what they maintain it to. The Corps has the ability to dredge to 27 feet, but they maintain it to 17. And so I don't expect that there's any need for any maintenance dredging to have that channel shift. As we do take down the old bridge, we have to remove the existing piers below where they would dredge. So there'll be some localized work around those, but channel dredging up and down, we don't anticipate that's a need right now. And then lastly, your question about the Coast Guard and the bridge depth, the superstructure depth. So yes, you're right. As you look at the movable span, lift span, that is actually really, we're looking at a lift span for the single level option, not the stacked option, because of the very thing you mentioned, Martha, is that you've got that whole superstructure move up and down, and it's better to have that movable span on the single level, not only just mechanically, but also for the dimensions and the depth and the clearance. So you're onto something there. So good observations.
Thanks, Ray. I think I'm next. My question, this is Jana. My questions were related to the elevation of the bridge. It's most of the designs you have are at 116 feet. Is that correct?
Yes, 116 feet clearance to the bottom of the bridge. Yes.
So the design that has the lift in it, is that bridge at a lower elevation going across the river?
Yeah. Yes, it would be a little lower. We anticipate it could be around between 90 and 100 feet. That's still being refined. That allows us to lower that to about the lower deck level of the stacked version, so where the transit might be. So we're able to bring that down. That does a couple things for us. It reduces the approach grade, so for trucks and cars and rail, a little bit easier. But it also keeps it high enough that we don't have a lot of bridge lifts. There's been some thoughts about why we just don't have that movable span option at the same level exists as it, excuse me, as the existing spans. And we could do that. However, it would cause a lot more bridge lifts. And we'd have to replace the railroad bridge on the north bank because it can't handle the current width. So we want to find the option we're looking at as a way to kind of provide enough clearance so the majority of river traffic can get through without a lift span, but that the ones that do have a lift, there's not a super huge number, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And I think in earlier conversations, you talked about the one level bridge without the lift would accommodate 90% of the, I don't remember exactly what the number was of the river traffic, but there were some situations that it wouldn't accommodate. So the bridge lift would accommodate the 100% of our needs, correct?
It would accommodate, yes, it would accommodate the request from the Coast Guard for the existing clearance or unlimited, and so it would provide the existing clearance of 178 feet.
And my last question related to the elevation is from the drawings, and of course I've never paid much attention to it before. I'm gonna have to pay a lot more attention, but it's the bridge is higher on the Washington side than it is on the Oregon side, correct? And that's it. The elevation is higher on the Washington side.
I'd say as they approach the bank, yes, it's higher on the Washington side, and that's because the peak or the high point in the bridge is on the north side of the middle of the river.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because that's where that channel is. We don't want to move it too far to the south because now the river traffic has to make an S curve as they move south and then have to come back north to get through the rail bridge. And so the river traffic is best aligned so they don't have to do that.
Okay, that's helpful.
And just a note, just so we can keep the train moving, we have we'll take these last two questions, Jeffrey and Robin, and then we'll need to move on to our next item here. So
I love the interest though. So yeah, that's good questions. Who's next?
I guess that's me. Thank you for the presentation. Just a quick comment. I hope that we don't need to resort to a lift bridge for I-5. My question is around capacity. Can you confirm if all of the various designs offer the same amount of vehicle capacity?
Yeah, so we are studying the 3 through lanes and 1 auxiliary lane and full shoulders. And so each of those options are there. And I think Administrator Johnson shared at some point that as we walked in, and that's the components of the modified preferred alternative, those 3 through lanes, auxiliary lane and shoulders, that the team wanted to make sure that we maintain schedule. And if the single auxiliary lane didn't meet the performance we're looking for, we didn't want to have to start again and start a separate analysis. So we are studying 3 through lanes as well as, and 1 auxiliary lane as well as 2 auxiliary lanes in each direction. So total of 4 in each direction, a total of 5 in each direction on the bridge, knowing that those auxiliary lanes start and stop in the interchanges and go away. They don't progress throughout the whole stretch of I-5. But yeah, a good question, Jeff.
Understood. And that is for each of the bridge designs that you just showed us.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Robin.
Yeah, thank you. What's the process, or how are you going to decide on a final design? And when do you anticipate having a final design?
Well, great question. So as we work this configuration discussion, that's the first step. We really need to understand, are we doing stacked? Are we doing the single level? Or are we potentially doing a movable span? We know that we've heard from the community or partners that nobody wants to put a stop sign back on the interstate. But we are studying this in good faith, and and need to work through the steps to evaluate it. So it could potentially be movable span on a single level. But once we arrive at that, and that will happen through the NEPA process, we can then begin the discussion around the bridge type, and that would happen after the ROD, and we talked about what the superstructure type is. What we're not going to do is create a chart with attributes and a matrix of checks and minuses and that type of thing. It's going to be much more engaging. And actually, I don't want to steal Tom's thunder later, but he's going to be talking about that process that we'll go through to guide us through a selected superstructure.
Thank you.
So I'll ask you to wait for his presentation.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for that engaging dialogue. Thank you, Ray. With that, we are going to turn over to Casey to unpack for us design. Casey?
Great. Great. Thanks, Johnell, and great job, Ray. I want to make sure that I'm sharing the right screen. I should see I'm going to bring the folks in the group back up to a little bit higher level in the program. Do you see the project area map on the screen?
Yes, we are seeing it.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so I want to get the folks on the call and the communities oriented to the recent project area maps that we've shared. We shared this last week at our Vancouver Community Forum and just this week at our Portland Community Forum. So these are new to the program. They're on our website. Often referred to them as the roll map because it's so long to get 5 miles in onto one sheet. But this roll map will give you the orientation of the program area, showing you all the investments that are being studied in the environmental impacts, the supplemental environmental impact statement. We want to get you familiar with these investments through the entire program corridor. Between now and the publishing of the draft supplemental late this year and subsequently the comment period, the 60-day comment period, we want to give you that orientation early and as early as possible to want to get you oriented, get you familiar with it, allow you to ask questions, get clarifications, just generally be prepared to see those investments then studied in the impact statement. So again, the roadmap does not reflect impacts being studied in the environmental document. It reflects the investments that are being studied. There's a key in the lower right corner of the map that shows you what's being shown on the map itself. Overall, though, this is represents, as Ray mentioned earlier, this is a very high-level design, bringing into the environmental study. We're at less than 10% design, conceptual level design. And through this year, we will be working on our delivery plan for the program, which will be available to the public early next year. That delivery plan gives us kind of a sequence of overall design and construction of this 5 miles of investments. And that sequence will then give folks a picture and a timeline to say, when will you be working on different elements of the program? A lot of folks ask, like the question here, when will we get to final design? So that delivery plan early next year will help enlighten you on all of us to show what the timeline and sequence of all the work is. We can't do it all at once, so we need to work on it over multiple years. So what I'm going to do is walk through the investments pretty quickly. I think I can gain a little bit of time back on your agenda here, Johnell, and walk through the program areas. I want to give more orientation to all the investments. So I'm going to skip around a little bit. I'm going to start in Oregon at the south end of the program. I'll jump over to Washington, but I'm going to end near the bridge both at Hayden Island and SR 14 so that we can roll right into Knight Architecture's presentation. So let me just orient real quick. North on this map is to your right, with the river, of course, in the middle. That would make west to the top of the screen, east to the bottom, and south to the left. So we have 7 closely spaced interchanges in the 5 miles. At the south end, we have Victory Boulevard interchange. And just verify if you can see my cursor as I go through. Someone yell at me. You can see my cursor.
Yes.
Excellent. So Marine Drive interchange, moving northward, Hayden Island interchange. On the Washington side, scooting over right across the bridge, we have the State Route 14 interchange, Mill Plain interchange, Boulevard interchange, 4th Plain Boulevard interchange, and then we end at the SR 500, State Route 500, and 39th Street interchange. Now remember that both the Marine Drive interchange and the Mill Plain Boulevard interchange, primary port access for Portland and Vancouver, and I mentioned the state routes and larger connectivity. So I will try not to make you sick as I zoom in. I'm going to zoom here on the left side of the program and just walk north. The investments reflect all of the investments that are addressing the purpose and need. That's the active transportation, the mass transit, the seismic vulnerability with the replacement bridge. As Ray mentioned, all of the elements of the modified locally preferred alternative. The lime green, or the green lines in the program map, reflect the shared use path facilities. And what is a little bit harder to see as you look through different areas are also the street networks that also have either both sidewalks and bicycle facilities adjacent as we develop those street networks. On the left side of the screen, you see the Marine Drive interchange where light rail transit currently terminates there at Expo Station. You can see in the orange line on the west side of the freeway, continuing light rail as the extension heading across Hayden Island with a station shown between Tomahawk Island Drive and Hayden Island Drive, shown in the yellow boxes. So you can see that's one of the 3 new stations in light rail. As I mentioned, active transportation today is not great for wayfinding. In the investments, you can see the connectivity of both the north-south shared use paths, as well as how those connect up with both the with east-west existing facilities such as the 40-mile loop trail, as well as other connections within, in this case, the city of Portland, where we have active transportation connecting to local streets and getting to and from Portland to the south. In the interchange itself, as a replacement of the Marine Drive interchange, the interchange is up in the air. Marine Drive itself to the west, MLK to the east is the east-west roadway. That actual intersection is now over the middle of the freeway, elevated above the freeway, what we call a single point urban interchange. All one signal for that at that location, and all the movements turning left there go through that signal. It does have the active transportation facilities on the east-west connection through that interchange, but we're also encouraging that before they get to the interchange, they go take the much nicer and wider shared use path of the 40-mile loop trail as we go east-west through the interchange. The movements for the interchange, we have all 4 directions for the Marine Drive interchange. In addition to the Marine Drive interchange itself, if you look over here where my hand is on the left side, if you're coming northbound on I-5 approaching Marine Drive, once you take the exit to Marine Drive, then you have an option to stay left and head underneath the interchange up to a local roadway. I'm pointing to that as this circular intersection here. Then that's your access from I-5 northbound over to Hayden Island. You turn right and then head over to Hayden Island across the arterial bridge shown here. In the reverse direction to go south from Hayden Island, you go across the arterial bridge, back underneath the freeway to the other intersection, and then enter the same on-ramp as the Marine Drive. To the left side of the Marine Drive interchange in concert with the Victory Boulevard interchange. We have a braided ramp getting on from Marine Drive to go southbound I-5. That braids over the top of the existing southbound exit to Victory Boulevard and Denver Avenue. The braided ramp is one just like auxiliary lanes or collector distributor lanes. Those are tools we have to address very closely spaced interchanges. Again, when you address one of these interchanges in the program area, you have effects on others. So I'm going to skip around on you just a little bit and head to the north so I can end at the south, or at the bridge head. We're going to go all the way in Washington and then come back. And I have to zoom out. So skipping over to Washington, the SR 500 fourth plane work being done in that area. I mentioned the braided ramp. This has a braided ramp addition for southbound I-5, braiding with the SR 500 westbound to southbound movement, very large movement today that's WashDOT in the last few years started with ramp meters. That braids that movement. Just as a side note, the resultant of that, if you're headed westbound on 500, you no longer can get off and go straight to Fourth Plain Boulevard interchange. You'd have to take a different route, such as 39th Street or Mill Plain. The Fourth Plain interchange, Boulevard interchange, doesn't get much of improvement or different form, excuse me, for the interchange itself, but it adjusts based on the needs for the freeway there, and as well as the braided ramp in the connections to Mill Plain Boulevard interchange. So moving south just a little bit. This also reflects the replacement of 29th and 33rd Street overcrossing. And each time we work through the investments in the program, of course, we want to look closely at the east-west connectivity of active transportation as well as north-south connectivity. So we're showing that though these bridges are replaced, if the facilities there aren't conducive to walking, biking, rolling, we want to make sure that those are great facilities for the options getting across the freeway. We want to make sure the freeway is reverse that idea that the actual, that's not an idea, the fact that the freeway is a barrier to crossing and connecting those neighborhoods. So each one of these that are there, we want to make sure that's the best it can be. Move south back towards the Mill Plain Boulevard interchange. Again, this is more efficient than the interchange today. It addresses the work on the mainline I-5. It addresses some clearance issues with the interchange itself, and addresses the active transportation through the area as well. To the south of the interchange, there is a collector distributor system between State Route 14 and Mill Plain Boulevard interchange in both directions. I'm going fairly quickly, but I aim to save just a little bit of time back. So I'm going to get close to the bridge here and get ready to answer any other questions and turn it over to Knight Architecture. So with the modified LPA, I mentioned light rail transit with the 3 new stations. So light rail transit, again, as Ray mentioned, in this option shown here, the double deck option shown under the southbound bridge, coming out to the Vancouver waterfront with a station at the waterfront. That's shown where my cursor is. Light rail hugging the I-5 alignment and ending at Evergreen Boulevard vicinity here at Library Square. The program is studying up to from 0 to 3 park and rides in Vancouver, up to 1 at the waterfront and up to 1 at Evergreen, again from 0, 1, or 2. Park and rides, and those are shown in these lighter reddish pink colored squares for options. The third one is a little bit hard to see, but it's about where my cursor is underneath the new bridges. And again, light rail, or excuse me, active transportation as it crosses over the river, and this option shown under the northbound bridge, coming out and dropping down at the Vancouver waterfront at the intersection of Columbia and Columbia. The full interchange at State Route 14 is an elevated interchange. The one thing I didn't mention at the beginning I needed to is this is reflecting permanent investments. some of the temporary works that are needed to do this work and keep traffic moving, not reflected in these maps. And the other part of that is that in some of the areas in the map, as you look and zoom in, you'll see various lines in the map. The outer kind of perimeter lines that may not look to follow what the investments look like. Those are what we would designate as, we think that's the limit of permanent impacts, or excuse me, not permanent impacts, the limit of permanent investments in the program area and what's being studied for those permanent investments in NEPA. There's also a dashed line that has also permanent underground investments, such as tieback of walls. And again, these are high level design, more work to do to figure out what is needed for those design works. And just to recap that, temporary construction, look, the limits of temporary construction is not reflected in these maps, but it will be published in the draft supplemental environmental impact statement this fall. And I want to end up with the bridge and Hayden Island a little bit more. I'll start with Hayden Island. I described the 2 ramps for the south side of Hayden, access from the south to Hayden Island. The 2 ramps from the north exit, southbound ends up at Jansen Drive, and northbound from Jansen Drive to northbound I-5. The addition of Tomahawk Island Drive underneath the freeway, so you have 3 east-west street connections under the freeway, as well as the bicycle and sidewalk facilities for those. One thing I didn't mention in Vancouver was the connection of a new connection of Main Street under all of the ISR 14 facilities down to the Vancouver waterfront. The lighter gray in the map represents when you're looking at, for instance, the interstate, but it's on a bridge structure. The dark black, almost dark colors represent the roadway when it's sitting on the ground, and it may be ground that's still at a higher level than the surrounding areas. For instance, the south side of Hayden Island, you see this darker area for I-5 in both directions. It's shown that that's not a bridge on a bridge structure, but it is elevated above, for instance, the local areas adjacent and off the sides of the improvements as shown there. I think I've covered most. The one last part I would say is that these roll maps, and we'll zoom back out a little bit, the roll maps reflect and show that there are options being studied within NEPA. The options shown on this roll map, again, include the double deck option, and then you see an inset graphic that shows what the single level bridge option looks like, and you can kind of see that most of the differences really occur between each shoreline or just onto the shoreline, and then from there the program difference is none from that point. On the right side, you see option A listed and option B. Those are a shift of the alignment in Vancouver, kind of more easterly alignment in the one on the main graphic, and then the inset is more of a westerly alignment, looking at a range of possibility for that alignment through Vancouver. Also in the option B, you will see other additional options. The northbound off-ramp to C Street, that's the loop ramp on the east side where my finger is pointing. And that's an option to potentially not build that back, as well as the southbound on-ramp from C Street to I-5. So those are independent options that are shown all within that collective graphic. That's about the activity that I wanted to walk through. I didn't mention the bridge too much, but Ray, I think, gave a pretty good overview of the bridge itself and the cross sections. And then, of course, Nikon Architecture is going to walk through their architecture. Any questions before I need to pass that on?
Yeah, Casey, you got a couple hands up already. So
all right.
Jana and then Bill.
Thank you. One of the things that I've been questioning in all of this discussion is if there's been some consideration to all of the oversized loads that move from the ports of Vancouver and Longview across the bridge and into routes in Oregon. So I'm just wondering if this will restrict any of that kind of movement.
Yeah, great question, Jana. We've been working with the Port of Vancouver on the existing and any proposed super load type, both height and width, length. One of the constraints running into this program or in the CRC we know was just loads getting to I-5, for instance. So yes, we are looking at all aspects of that, from travel through the corridor, especially from those known elements through the program area. So as we design these, we don't have a hard design requirement, but we are considering how can we make that work without significant change. But so far, again, at this early stage, we will get more into that with final design, but we believe that we can get those loads through based on what we've received from the port and known from up north.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I work with a group called the High, Wide, and Heavy Coalition, and it's got the ports as part of it. So if we can offer any assistance there, we're happy to.
Thank you.
Thank
you. My question, Bill, I'm jumping right in here. My question is brief, and maybe I missed it when you said it, but it looks like this is the same exact footprint as the bridge is currently. Is that correct? Or are they going to be building and the traffic continue to flow as they're building a new bridge? Or are they going to, how's that footprint look at night?
Yeah, I think I follow what you're saying, Bill, and I think I'll start from the bridge out. Let me say it another way, and how do we build this and keep traffic going? Because we can't just shut down the freeway, right?
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Yeah.
Exactly. So the offset of the bridge itself is one of the key parts of that. Of course, we have multiple years of constructing the main river crossing and bridge anticipated. As we're building that, we need to work closely with will be our design builder to plan to keep traffic moving in both directions. Our goal is, our commitment actually is to keep 3 through lanes of traffic in each direction moving through the program duration. And there will be times when we impact that traffic. We try to do that similar as we do today with long lead times for the public. There may be weekend closure of lanes or nighttime closure of lanes, shoulders. There will be some ramps that might be impacted for longer durations as we try to replace some structures and bridges within the program area. Those will be advertised in advance and with known detours advertised for those. It is a challenge. It is trying to build a whole new set of infrastructure in the same place as it was. As you reach both sides of the on land, is that really becomes prevalent, is trying to shift without adding a whole bunch of different impacts. And we've often referred to this as threading the needle, because we have to shift the traffic in different directions, kind of shift them to the west, shift them to the east. Meanwhile, we have some tie-ins to make. There'll be some minor closures when we work on those tie-ins at both ends of the bridges. And then, as we sequence the rest of the program as well.
I'd say it's more like you're going to be changing the wings on the airplane in the middle of the flight.
Heard that one too. I like that one. I not like doing it, but actually I like doing it. It's a good challenge. But it's really important to the communities, obviously, and the economy and well-being of the communities. So I understand that.
Zachary?
Thank you. It's really striking, the image, to see it all. I appreciate you laying that out for us. One of the things kind of putting on the lens of a pedestrian advocacy organization is we're often told there's not enough money for that improvement. There's not enough money for that improvement, et cetera. So there's always like a resource question, right? And I'm curious, when you look at this project, if you could kind of give us your opinion about what if these things are have tos? You know, like we have to have a new bridge. We all know that, right? So that's a have to. There's certain connections that have to happen. So I'm just curious, like, as you kind of look at this map, are there some things that are like tier 1 have tos, tier 2 really want to, tier 3s, things that we could like stagger so that if budget is, you know, we go over budget, we can pull back on some of those other pieces so that we aren't robbing from other projects in Washington and Oregon?
Yeah, great question. To start, the program is developed again to address the 6 items, the purpose and needs. So each of the investments that are made here are intended to do that. They work in concert with each other. This is a major multimodal corridor program intended to provide all the benefits through all of the investments made. And the difficulty in saying that some of those today are lesser in priority, it's very difficult. Like you said, is you know, I'm going to say it, in the past, you get to towards the end of the program and you have to cut corners, and what are the things you have to cut? In the past, it's been, well, we have to cut some landscaping. We have to cut some, are there extra active transportation? That's not our goal. We are aimed to the center, the climate and equity up front. We want to make sure that the active transportation is there to provide the options for those users that need those facilities. We have same thing with the transit connectivity. I mentioned active transportation, not only the shared use paths, but all the connectivity to the existing system. That's the local street system, the transit centers that are being envisioned around each of these stations. It's very difficult to say at this point. You have a prioritization that says these aren't needed. All of the investments here address the 6 purpose needs statements. And one of the backbones of that, again, is we have very closely spaced interchanges. We have a lack of the mass transit connectivity across the river, as well as the active transportation. We don't have, we have seismic vulnerability today. Each one of these has all of their purpose inside of it. So
yeah, that's a good answer, Casey. I think, yeah, we're not approaching it with that mindset. We're approaching it with the mindset of we need to address those 6 purpose and need statements while centering equity and climate. And so we're trying to find the solutions that address those, that have partner and community support, and study those. So that's our aim right now. And our aim is also to stay within program budget. And that's a continually estimating and updating process. So just not the way we approach it.
We are about, according to my agenda, about 35 minutes over when we were thinking that Laura and Tom would share with us a bit about the urban design bridge architecture. We are super excited about the fact that you're leaning in and sharing and asking questions, because we know this is what you've been waiting for. So we'd rather take the time to do this and for you to continue to ask questions. So we're gonna just kind of keep moving forward, and the pieces of this that we aren't able to complete, we will start there the next meeting. But what I think is really interesting about this conversation, and Zachary, your question, and Casey's response, and Ray's response, is really also a part of what we're teeing up as your homework. So we don't often ask you to do work between meetings, and we don't often ask you to show back up with the results of your homework. And so we're wanting you to really lean into what will be important to you as individuals, what will be important to you as organizations. That all feeds into that developing urban design principles and goals, that links to that really good work that we've already done as a community advisory group around values and priorities. So that's a slide embedded here, but it really speaks to how are we really looking at the purpose and need as it is activated in the design elements. So you have a role in that, and I think it's really kind of ensuring that it's aligned with the pieces that we've already worked a lot on over the last few years. So with that, I'm gonna hopefully turn it on over to the folks that are joining us from England. And Tom and Laura, interested in having you lead the bridge design goals conversation.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Tom Osborne. I'm a director at Knight Architects. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction, and then I'm going to hand over to Laura Langridge, who's our lead architect on the project, who's going to take you through a bit more of the detail. Yeah, we're just going to talk to you about who we are, because we're a relatively small company on a relatively big scheme. How we get to good design, which is a great question that Robin asked earlier. Why and the who, and then exploring how that design affects bridge users. Next slide, please. And the next again. So we're Knight Architects. We specialize exclusively in bridge design. We're pretty useless at anything with a door, but bridges are all that we do. We've been doing them for 17 years. And really what I wanted to show you on this slide, I hope you can see that there's quite a variety to our portfolio. And the reason there's a variety is that we don't have a company style. And what we try and do with all of our projects is to understand what the right solution for the specific location and the specific communities of those schemes are. So we work all around the world, and we really want to be designing your bridge, not our bridge. Next slide. So how do we get to good design for the IBR? That's the right question. And the way to do that is to establish what good design looks like. What are we aiming at achieving here? And rather than it being, design is a very subjective subject. And what we don't really want to be doing is just giving you the typologies that you've seen earlier and then saying, which of these do you like? Because that leads to differing opinions, and design does start with looking at different options, as we are doing now, these different typologies, but it does not end there. Design is an iterative process. It's about creating something, about building something and refining it. So whilst we might start with these high-level typologies, that is certainly not the end of design. It's only just the start, and we certainly don't want to give you the impression that the lovely renders that you're seeing are sometimes people misconstrue those as completed design because they can sort of see a material and see a boat driving under it. They think that's it, but it's not. These are really just sketches of typologies, and the design work is ahead of us. So yeah, the other thing that if we give you a bunch of typologies to assess against a selection of criteria and sort of leave it at that, what we found in the past is that tends to lead to the least worst design rather than the best design. And it can lead to not a very well-rounded design, and something that certainly doesn't fit as well as a design could. So what we want to try and do is build consensus, build a narrative around the design, so that when we get to the final product and they're cutting the ribbon on the bridge, everybody knows why it looks that way. Everybody understands the narrative that supports it. Next. Sometimes we get asked what bridge architecture is, and it can be misunderstood as decorative or adding something to the engineering. And that's certainly not what bridge architecture is. Bridge architecture is an integrated discipline with that of the engineer. It's about refining, polishing, and really putting people at the heart of design. Next slide. So we like to say that we don't yet know what the design for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Programme will look like, but we do know how to get there. And we think a really important part of that process is asking the right questions. Often when you ask people what should the bridge be, they will ask closed questions first, like how will it be built, and what does it look like? But we think it's quite important, really essential, to first ask open questions about why is it needed and who is it for, and that will sort of develop a brief that you can respond to with what it looks like and how will it be built. That will come, but it has to come after the sort of more people-centric questions. First think of people, then think of the object. Next slide, please. I just put in this slide because so the engineers on the scheme are WSP, and we work with WSP for many years, all around the world. And this is I was in Helsinki last week, and this is a big project where it's 1.2 kilometers across the bay, mostly for pedestrians and cyclists actually. And it wasn't the geometry of the scheme that I wanted to mention here, but really the time it takes to get there. So we won this competition in 2012. So I've been working on this scheme for over a decade, and throughout that time, in the initial stages, we did work out lots of different typologies, brainstorm ideas, but most of that time was about refining the design towards the finished product, about improving things and polishing it so that it becomes a really lasting feature of the city. Next slide. Yeah, I mean, I can skip over this. This is really just a poster to say put the why and the who questions before the what and the how questions. So we've spoken a little bit about alignment design, the route that the road surface takes across the water and the land. We then have to hold that road up with structure, and then that structure interacts with the urban landscape around it. Next slide. So bridge architecture, I think, kind of sits at the nexus of that. If you could just go back one. Bridge architecture sort of sits really at the nexus of the sort of road alignment and the urban realm. We have to work at all scales. So from the typologies that you were seeing earlier, if it's a cable stay or a truss or a beam, right the way down to the details of if it's a handrail and how you, and even the signage and the soffit, the piers, how it interacts with the world around it. And the architecture of the bridge and the urban design exercise are sort of two sides of the same coin. The better we can make the bridge structure, the better the spaces around the bridge are going to be, the more inviting it is to be next to the bridge, to live next to it, to be underneath it, the safer it will make you feel as part of your journey. So I'll hand over to Laura at this point, who's going to talk you through a few of those journeys and how this bridge might affect people.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so just to recap where we're going with this in terms of the process. So today we're talking about the bridge design values or goals, so who and why, and we're really interested in getting your feedback on both the process and some goals that you would be interested in including in this. We're looking at bridge design constraints. It's setting that up for the discussion in July. So what does the bridge need to achieve in terms of physical constraints, threading the needle, so to say. And then bridge configuration, looking at discussing that more in detail towards August. So how are we going to start carrying out different bridge options that meet both the goals that we set up and the constraints? And then moving into bridge typologies and route-wide structured design and non-structural elements as well that can apply to any option that we pick. Next slide. So when trying to answer the big why question for the bridge, we started with the project purpose and need. And they tell us a lot about the big picture, but they don't tell us specifically what the bridge should look like. And so we need to start to develop these specifically to guide our design of the bridge. So next step. So we've been working with the urban design team to develop some urban design principles and goals, which would feed into the different urban design disciplines there, looking towards getting to a holistic urban design for the project. Next slide. And we've been starting with the project desired outcomes. And we've been identifying different goals that we see as kind of key to our work, differentiators in what we are doing. They're all important, all of these desired outcomes, but some of them are much more specific to what we would be doing. So these are starting to identify some that are met by all design options, some that would be addressed in coordination with other disciplines, and then a few of these outcomes which are directly linked to the design of the bridges and the urban realm. Next slide. And then we've also been trying to pull into this consideration from the previous values and priorities. Johnell, did you have a couple words to say on this slide? Somebody was going to jump.
I think Lisa does.
Lisa, sorry.
No, that's okay. This is similar to the comment that I made just a couple minutes ago. This is work that this community advisory group has already done, which is put in place the values and the priorities. And Laura is threading it with the desired outcomes, which is threaded with the purpose and need. So this is just another reminder of the good work that this group has already done. And so as we continue to look at urban design principles, I think it's important that we also remind ourselves of the values and priorities that this group has already identified.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, so we're trying to pull all of these goals and desired outcomes and aims together to form something that would really be a good basis to start building the design off of. Next slide. So this is a very, very large program. It's got some very big goals. And one of the challenges is that we want to look at spend some time considering the scale differential of this project. So generally on a very small project, let's say you had a very small footbridge, and the consideration of the user on that is important, but if you didn't consider the user, the impact would be that you don't have a very nice footbridge. On a scheme like this, which is about 5 miles, if we're not considering the human scale and the user impact, it has a very big potential to negatively impact communities and the people around it. And this is something that we want to avoid. The federal government currently has a pilot program called Reconnecting Communities to kind of reverse harm across infrastructure across the United States, where connection between communities has been severed. And this is not where we want to go with this project. We want to set it up right at the beginning, that it is good and positive for the communities that it goes through, that there is good connection east-west, and that we're really thinking about how it impacts people who are living around it, who are using it, and the daily lives of the people here. So next scale. So who is using it? This is what we really want to start with. We've got a wide variety of people interacting with the structures. People will be passing under it, passing on top of it, east-west connections as well as north-south. People who might never use the bridge, but it's part of their daily lives around it and on it and under it. It's also worth noting that the bridge itself is not just the main crossing, but it impacts how the bridge comes down to ground, both on Hayden Island and Vancouver. Next slide. So what we wanted to do, rather than simply kind of zooming around a 3D model of the bridge, is start to consider some typical users specifically. So people who interact with the project in one way or another. And we can use these indicative journeys as a tool to discuss the design and to develop some key considerations and goals. We could have started with a vehicle user. However, their experience of comfort while using the bridge will be largely driven by highway and safety design codes. And for the most part, they're in their car in a controlled environment, and the traffic is flowing and they're happy. So we wanted to start by exploring a user who may be more vulnerable or sensitive to the design and the structures. So in this case, we looked at Lizzie, who is a resident on Hayden Island. And we wanted to start to understand how she would experience these structures up close and at a slower speed than a car user. So we're looking at a series of views along a typical journey to start to understand what the space might look like and what key goals could be at each point. And we've written a few key goals beneath some of these images. And this is something that we would be really interested in getting feedback on. What might be important to you? What might be important to your best friend or your partner or the people that you live with in and around these structures. Next slide. So for instance, imagine you're coming along Tomahawk Island Drive and you're crossing under the structures here. What could that feel like? Does it feel safe? How could the design of the structure support an equitable solution? And so some things that we often think about in this situation is how would that feel safe for all users at all times of day? Be something that people feel comfortable using, comfortable traveling underneath. You can hardly see them in that picture there, but there are little purple people, and they're very small in comparison to these bridges. The scale differential is huge. And so we need to address these spaces very carefully and make sure that they are comfortable and inviting and beneficial to the communities that they serve. Next slide. So just some examples of challenging crossings under bridges that we can learn some lessons from. So the one on the left, looking at very good lighting, some high quality materials and visibility through the whole route, so you can see where you're going before you enter the tunnel. And there's a kind of increased perceived safety when you know where you're going and you can see where you're going. The one on the right, looking at how we could actually shape the structure. So the shape of the abutment and the edge of the deck are quite chamfered to allow a kind of gradual transition to the space underneath. So these kinds of goals for high quality space below or welcoming can then be translated into the physical shape of the structures themselves. Next slide. So this one is looking at a different user's journey, Rob, the cyclist who commutes from Hayden Island to Vancouver. And we will discuss more as we go through these meetings, the experience on deck. And the image here is a sketch of what could potentially be a space where Rob is coming up the shared use path ramp up towards the bridge. So we don't want you to focus too much on the specific of the design in these images, but use them as a prompt to start to think about what it would feel like to be in these spaces and to think about what could be some goals and priorities for improving the user experience on and around these bridges. Next slide. So this couple examples here where we've looked at shared use paths where they are separated from the highway. So on the left, we've got a timber barrier that helps to temper the effects of noise. And the path is actually dropped a bit. So as a user on the shared use path, you're quite protected. You've got nice views out to the landscape. And the experience of the highway isn't as direct and immediate. Next slide. And then some more examples that we can use to think about experience on deck. From the one on the left, which is very enclosed, which might be a discussion that we have about whether or not enclosure is a good thing on a bridge shared use path. To the one in the middle, very open, but looking at areas for rest, as well as segregated cycle lanes and lookout points. And then the one on the right, which we might have discussions about shade or wind protection, different things on the bridge deck itself. Next slide. So what we'd like to do is use this method to walk through different routes, different viewpoints, and to really explore as we go through these meetings what aims and goals we will have for the people who live and use in this, live and work and use these structures. We can move to the questions now. Would you like me to introduce this? So I guess the first question is we would like to know whether you kind of agree with this people-first approach to design, if this method resonates with you and seems like a kind of good way to approach and discuss and move forward with this. And
I see lots of hands. Sorry.
And then secondly, what would be important to you as an individual? So thinking about goals at these different spaces. And I think there will be lots of opportunities to talk about this over the coming months. So if you don't think of it today, keep it, please give us feedback as we go forward. So
we might need to put those slides back up again. It's 5:51. So I just want to just mention that as the facilitator, there's a couple of things that I'll need to do, but I do see the hands up. So I want to be able to allow some quick time to be able to answer the questions that Laura has asked, but I also like for the folks that have hands up to recognize there's more than one person's hand up. So if you could give a comment relatively quickly, so that I can also just double check. Brent's telling me that no one has signed up for public comment, but I still need to make sure that I offer the opportunity. So maybe just 1 minute real quick. Laura has asked, do you agree with this people first approach design? And secondly, what will be important to you as an individual? So you can answer both or one of those or provide another comment or feedback. So maybe just 1 minute each. So Tom, Sam, Dina.
Thank you. Yes, I do agree with this, and I was very pleased to see it in the slide deck as I was reviewing the agenda this afternoon. I think it's something I've been pushing all along, that the experience of the bridge needs to be thought of as you're crossing it. It's sort of like no matter how you're crossing it, you should be experiencing the bridge like a story or like a symphony or something. As a beginning, a middle, and end. There's sort of an adventure on the path. You know, there's got to be sort of an experience of crossing the bridge, whether you're in the car, whether you're on foot, whether you're on a bike, that has a full story to it. And as humans, we want that story to sort of start out with some excitement and climb and build, and then like reach a denouement and then come down to a satisfying conclusion. And that's the human experience. And crossing the bridge should have that quality. Thank you.
Sam.
Okay, I'm off mute now. Sorry, I was talking. So just real quick, as a software developer, you know, this is the principles we use, the storyboard, and look at what the stakeholders' feedback are and so forth. So I can absolutely identify with this. So I really love this. I love the visualization. It's beautiful. It kind of makes me go, hey, when can we get going on building this bridge? So what's important to me is everything you mentioned, plus what I didn't see was light rail. What is it? What is the high capacity transit look like? What is that? What is that experience? Getting on, getting off, stops. Will this stop in the middle of the bridge? Is there a station there? I don't think so, but you know, what is that user experience? So I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Dina?
So I like the human experience approach, but I also think we also need to remember that this bridge represents a huge economic impact to our region, and that there are a lot of organizations that move a lot of freight and represent billions of dollars of economic impact that also need to be considered. And when you're looking at it from just a people perspective and not from sort of an organization or industry perspective, that I think you're missing out on a lot of the picture. Especially like the picture that you showed of what it's like to go under the bridge. It was only from the perspective of the land part under the bridge. It wasn't, what does it look like when you're actually loaded with cargo trying to get under the bridge? How does that experience, and do you feel safe, and is there enough clearance? And what about when the water's higher or lower? You know, how is that moving with the current, and what is it like? So I think taking into account the experience of the commuters, of the trucking and freight movement that's happening on the bridge, under the bridge, as well as the humans who actually operate all of those equipment, that equipment moving across, and the economic impact that they bring to the region. Thank you.
Great comments. Sherry?
Actually, that was very well said by Dina. Don't think I need to say much more, but when we think in terms of freight movement, of the human experience, we're thinking of the truck driver who's enduring congestion and, other factors. And, just keep in mind, freight doesn't have discretionary options. They don't take a bus or ride on the back of a bike. And so we have to take into consideration the experience of the truck driver and the freight that's moving across the bridge.
Thank you. I might be frozen. Everyone else looks frozen. I don't look frozen.
No,
Okay.
you're not frozen. You're not frozen.
Okay, great. Irina.
Hey, we talked about the the water traffic and the traffic on the river. I want to bring the air controllers and the guys who regulate the height of the bridge. So it would be nice to maybe invite them, that they'll explain the logic of the requirements for the height, because sometimes it's just sounds bureaucratic and we cannot get the idea why they need the certain height. If current height is for example, not too high for them and they want the bridge lower. So that's my input.
Okay, last comment, Jarina.
So I'm kind of in agreement with the folks who are worried about the freight crossings and those drivers. And I think that is a huge thing we need to consider. And if just timing getting across that bridge in general, because that holds up medical appointments, that holds up, all kinds of stuff if we have to stop on that. So I really do think that the movable span is something we should really look twice at before we try to consider it. Things like that, but that's all. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I hope Tom and Laura, you'll come back and finish what you started. I'm sorry we didn't have as much time, but I think that it will also demonstrate to you how eager this group is to roll up their sleeves and provide input and ask questions. To the CAG members, you do have the opportunity to come back with some homework. So those of you that are on the CAG that represent organizations, this is your opportunity to ask your organizations what will be important to you. Some of you have already shared that because you already know what will be important. Those of you that are at-large members, this is your moment to come back with some thoughts and some ideas. You've already given some initial feedback. We did not have enough time to be able to go around the Zoom room and ask for a good dialogue and feedback. And I think it will be a really great opportunity next time, perhaps to even just do breakout sessions to be able to allow for some more conversation. Given the time, it's 5:59. Brent, I am just going to ask again if you have anyone that is signed up for public comment. I do think we need to bring the slide up. This is opportunity for public comment. And while that is happening, I do want to mention we have an EAG meeting June 26th. And we have a CAG meeting, our next one together, which is July 13th. And my hope is that you'll have some homework and you'll have had some conversations. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll just read here real quick. If you are interested in making any public comment, we have not received any public comment via email to the CAG, so we did not pass any along. It's been a few months since we have. If you are interested in making comments at these public meetings, we invite you to do so. You may call in via phone, and the number is 1-669-900-6833. Meeting ID is 993-5459-6043, passcode 674942. Next slide. I think it's just wrap up. So Ed, do you have any feedback? We're right at the time. And so if you are not calling in with any public comments and you have not sent in any feedback via email, which we would invite you to do so, then Ed, I think you can just maybe close this out.
Well, I think this slide says thank you. I would just like to thank all of the CAG members and all of the presenters. This has really been one of the more interesting meetings, and the information provided, and I just feel like we're really getting down to where the rubber meets the road. So I hope that we will have the opportunity to have a lot of open discussion about this, because I just think that this was a wonderful door opener. And presenters, thank you so very, very much for it. It just really makes you think about a lot of things, you know, when it comes to the bridge, and it sort of lets you know that it belongs to everybody, not any one person or one industry or anything like that. So I'm happy that we're here, and thank you all so very, very much for your excellent participation this evening and the excellent presentation. That's all I have to say. And I hope Lynn's having a great time on her vacation. I would love to be in the Mediterranean also. So thank you. And if that's it, are we through?
I think so. Thank you all.
Nice to meet you all.
All right.
Thank you. Great
Good night.
meeting. Bye.